And that little phrase actually made me stuck for, I'd say, a good probably 15 years past the time I should have stayed in my marriage. Who wants to make God upset? No one.
You're listening to the Spiritually Unboxed podcast. I'm your host, Leah Samara, spiritual mentor and authenticity strategist for highly driven female leaders. Each week, we'll dive into deeper conversations, empowering you to live your most authentic and wildly impactful life beyond religious, familial, and societal boxes. Welcome to the deep end. Subscribe so you don't miss a show. So if you are a highly driven, high capacity woman who is so impact driven, you love making a contribution to the world around you, and you are really committed to self, spiritual, and leadership development and transformation in 2024, I have an amazing offer for you. We are opening the doors to School of Samara, which is my new membership experience. It's like an all access, very exciting community. I'm so excited to get this rumbling because you guys are going to get access to all my new courses and masterclasses and all my current ones as well. You get access to School of Personal Sovereignty. Anyway, it's for the woman who wants to evolve at hyper speed while making an impact. It's for the woman who wants to decondition from these patterns to get them out of her system so that she can go and live her most authentic and wildly impactful life. So if this excites you, I want you to go to schoolofsamara.com/membership, and I want you to join us. A warm welcome to Tina, who I have been following her on Instagram for a while. And I was actually just saying to Tina how I just love the way that she shows up in the world. And it's really clear to me the work that she's done on herself. I'm just about to read her bio, but when you hear what she's been through, that will make a load of sense. Because when you've gone through what Tina has gone through, there are a lot of kind of coping mechanisms that we come up with. There's a lot of anger and frustration and that kind of thing that we work through. So for me, it's amazing. The way that I get to watch you show up has been really admirable. So I'm excited to hear your story today. So Tina grew up in the South Pacific, so random, as not just a preacher's kid, but she was also a missionary kid as well. And then her family moved back to the USA, and Tina went to Bible school in Texas, where she met her now ex-husband. They served in ministry together and owned a successful international sales business. So she was married for 22 years, had 4 kids, and then she was the one that filed for divorce after years of narcissism and abuse through the marriage. So she's free now, and she works in divorce recovery with abuse survivors and those who want to come out of spiritual abuse. And she wants the stigma of divorce from abuse to be changed in the church mindset. And her joy is spending time with her kids and exploring the world, which I love as well. And I think it says so much about you and the life that you found and the joy you found after all of this, and not kind of anchoring your identity in it. Finding the joy afterward is the most beautiful thing. So yeah. I just want to give a slight disclaimer, and that's that we are not going to always agree with each other, and you guys who are listening or watching, you're not always going to agree, but I love that we can all just lean into this, honor each other's stories, give space for stories, give space for differences of opinions, and that's the beautiful thing about the Spiritually Unboxed podcast. This is also your trigger warning. We are going to talk about abuse and divorce and narcissism and spiritual abuse and all the things, so if you need a trigger warning, that is your trigger warning. Today, we're talking about thriving after divorce, how Tina challenges the God hates divorce narrative for women who dare to break free of divorce. Did I say divorce twice? I did. When I say God hates divorce, does that bring up anything for you straight away? Like anything in your body where you're like, oh.
No, I mean, yes, it did early on. And do I get sick of that statement? Yes, of course, because it's a little phrase that we've had shoved down our throat with really no explanation, no further context, I find. It's brought up typically when we're doing our talk on, husbands love your wives and wives submit to your husbands. And then we'll throw in, about divorce not being good, typically. And that's all I knew, right? And that little phrase actually made me stuck for, I'd say, a good probably 15 years past the time I should have stayed in my marriage, had that ingrained in me. And who wants to make God upset? No one. When you've got a husband that, of course, doesn't want you to leave, and both sets of parents were Christians, I was always around Christianity. It was just something that I blocked out as even being an option, even though I desperately, desperately wanted it to be an option for so, so long. So, yeah, do I like that phrase? No, I think it's an abusive phrase, actually.
I love that you just open with that and just say.
Yeah. Let me first say too, though, I am so pro family and pro marriage. Like I am not like out here as a feminist or something going, you can do it on your own. It's great. Divorce is painful and messy and so ugly, and hopefully not someone's first choice. I mean, it certainly wasn't my first choice. So let me just say, that I love a good reconciliation story and a good redemptive story. Not everyone has to end up the same way I did, but I do want it to be known that it is an option. Don't limit yourself if you find yourself in the same situation.
Could you share some of your life story with us, even setting us up from your childhood? Because this is very interesting, right? You got Pastor Kid, Missionary Kid, and how that kind of led you to the marriage and then beyond that as well. So the beliefs and the conditioning that led you there and beyond.
Sure. So I come from a family that's like 4 or 5 generations of ministers. My grandfather is quite a well-known author and evangelist. And even though he died almost 30 years ago now, I still, on Instagram, people will reach out to me and say, "You're not by any chance related to Leonard Ravenhill?" I always say yes, of course. And
yeah.
And so I mean, talk about kind of a heavy thing on me. I love the heritage. I also don't love the heritage. My parents then were in ministry. We were missionaries in Los Angeles with a group called YWAM for many years, and then moved to Papua New Guinea for a couple of years, and then moved to New Zealand. And that's where my dad became a minister. So I haven't known a life outside of my family being involved in Christianity in some way. And of course, that shaped me. I didn't have any other options. That was the option. The good thing that came out of that was I've always known God loved me. I don't know what it is, but I've just had that faith. And so yeah, that's been really wonderful. My mother had mental illness my whole life. She was abused as a child, and I would imagine that created some real problem for her. And so, my parents being in ministry, that was just one of the things that was definitely covered up. My parents did not believe in counseling or medication. Yeah. So the consequence of that was all of us kids really, really were emotionally and verbally abused by my mother. My dad was always at work in the church. And so us kids had to just kind of handle my mother. And so that left me in a very vulnerable place. When we eventually moved back to the States, and I decided to go to Bible college, and there I met my husband. Part of it was I wanted to get away from my family. I think I was probably in a lot of culture shock as well, moving from New Zealand to Dallas, Texas. It was crazy culture shock. When I met my husband in Bible college, he definitely love bombed me. He brought his mother down to meet me. Immediately, she flew down, and she just kind of enveloped me in love. And of course, I was so susceptible to needing that, right? I didn't have a mother that treated me well. All of a sudden, I've got this mother who is hugging me, loving me, telling me how wonderful I am, buying me presents. I mean, our family was very frugal. I mean, I grew up just not having a lot. And so I thought that was fantastic. This was going to be everything I ever wanted. I went from a mother who didn't treat me very well into being love bombed by a mother who wanted to really cover for her son, who actually didn't treat me very well. But I felt like that's how I deserved to be treated, because that's the way my mother had treated me growing up. That kind of, made me susceptible, if you want to put it that way. And I tell people it was like a familiar spirit. I married a familiar spirit. And that kind of breaks my heart every time I say it, even about myself, because gosh, if I'd known that information, then gosh, what different choices I would have made. But here we are, and so we got married after Bible college. My family actually did not like him very much. But again, I was just jumping out of the family that I didn't like myself, my own family. And I kind of ignored all the warning signs and went, how bad can it be? Only to find out it could be pretty bad. I kind of was left going, oh, I don't know what to do with myself, which sounds pathetic and pitiful. I don't know why I didn't have visions for myself. But again, I didn't. I wasn't raised with parents that paid a lot of attention to my life. They were busy doing their ministry thing, and I was never filled with much vision or encouragement to kind of think about my future. So marriage was a good option for me at 21, as crazy as that sounds. And I was in America and didn't really know what to do with myself.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's really something that I find is a common thread in conservative circles, especially with women, because it's like if we see women as overall their role is to be wives and to like their value is to be wives and to serve and to have kids and your value is in your womb and all those kind of things, then it's the logical thing that you wouldn't be encouraged to fly and think bigger. And it's like your potential's not really expanded. I find that's a really common just a common thing with women who have come from conservative backgrounds. Yes, it's sad. And it's like marriage
so unfortunate.
Marriage is the pedestal.
Yeah. Well, that the whole be fruitful and multiply. And, there's all these like things that, you are kind of, that's my mission, right? To have a Christian husband and, this Christian family. And again, it's not everybody, but in my circles that was kind of the way it was. So
it's very relatable. Are you able to share a little bit of what your experience was within the marriage, and then what was the final straw moment that you were like, I've had enough?
I didn't really understand what was happening to me. I was slowly being programmed. I had a lot of wounds. I had a lot of wounds from my parents being in ministry. About 3 years into our marriage, my husband decided he was done working in the IT computer kind of world, and he decided that he wanted to go into ministry. And I remember he wanted to move actually back to his hometown up in New York, and we were living in Kansas at the time. And I begged him. I said, I'm not ready. I don't want to do ministry. And we were in the basement of our home, and he basically just said to me, I don't care what you want. You're going to do what I want. And I'm tired of waiting for you to get healed over your ministry wound. I'm going off. You met me in Bible school. I've always wanted to do Bible school Christian things. And I'm going, whether you like it or not, kind of get in line.
Yeah.
And I remember just sobbing and sobbing. And that was maybe, probably not even 3 years into our marriage. And so, at that moment, I look and I go, oh my gosh, what a red flag, right? What a terrible, terrible thing. But again, the programming of my childhood and being in marriage was you submit, you're a wife, you submit, you go along. And I was pregnant with our first child at that point. So life kind of continued that way. I learned quickly to just he had a temper, and I learned how to, acquiesce to the things that he wanted in order to not hit that temper point. And so, I just want to say I was abused. I was not abused regularly. I was abused verbally, emotionally, spiritually, very much. Physically, not as much. I was definitely physically abused, but not as much, because I learned very quickly how to avoid having him get to that place. I learned to say whatever I needed to say, to do whatever I needed to do in order to not have him physically hurt me. He and I actually went away on a trip. He was involved in a bunch of business things outside of our sales business that we had. And we went away on a business trip together. And when we came back, we were driving late at night. We had left our kids for like 10 days with some friends. And we were driving home, and he and I were in the car, and he just started an argument. I had closed something in the car that he didn't like, and he just went off. And it was one of those crazy random things. I knew he was tired from traveling. And I tried again, did everything I knew to diffuse the situation. And about 15 minutes before we arrived home, he rekindled the argument and just said, are you not going to resolve this with me? And I said, I've apologized. I don't know what else to do. Can we just leave this alone? And he went off and just started screaming at me that, you are the worst person. You are such a dishonorable woman and a terrible wife. And I mean, I can't reenact it because it was just horrendous. And he just started screaming and screaming and screaming. And I finally just said, I cannot stop saying those things over me. I'm not a terrible wife. And he reached over and he grabbed me by the back of the neck and just started shaking me like a rag doll. And I was banging my head into the window and instantly terrified because he's driving with one hand and shaking with the other. Yeah, it was a stick shift. We're swerving. It's dark. We're driving actually on a country road. I just thought, okay, this is the worst it's ever been. There's something about being trapped in a car with somebody and them screaming and shaking you by the back of the neck. And so I tried to push him off, and it just, made him more angry. And so we were coming to a stop sign, and I thought he's going to have to take his hand off my neck to downshift the car. And I thought, I'm going to jump out of the car. There's nothing I can do. He's going to kill us. I want to see my kids again. I don't want two people dead in a car crash. I'm going to open the door and jump out of the car.
Wow.
And so I got the door open and I got one leg out. I hadn't remembered about my seatbelt. And so when I tried to get out, I realized I still had my seatbelt on. So I went to unhook myself, and he noticed what I was doing. And he swerved the car. So, the force kept me in the car. The door slammed shut. And I then really started freaking out. So I thought, now he's not going to slow down. I'm never going to be able to jump out. And I just started screaming, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to call the police. You're trying to kill me. And something about me calling the police, instantly he stopped, and he immediately then started going, I'm so sorry, don't call the police, please don't call the police. And yeah, that was the moment that I thought, I will never ever trust you again. My life was in so much danger, and I thought, I can't do this to my children. I have to figure out a way. I kind of left in stages. In my heart, I never, ever loved him again, but it took me 3 more years to leave, because we were building a business and I wanted to get our business to a certain place because financially I wanted to be taken care of. That did not work out that way. But I quietly thought about leaving almost every day for the next 3 years until I finally did. So that was a very defining moment. And there were many others with things with my children and things like that that just made my resolve more. But yeah, I didn't want to pull that trigger. I never did. I still, in those 3 years that I kind of hated his guts and still hung in there, kept thinking, I wish this man would change. So finally, 3 years later, I finally pulled the trigger, and I did tell him I wanted a divorce. I'd actually traveled to New Zealand for 3 weeks with our business and visited my family. And when I came back, I thought, this is my moment. I've been gone for 3 weeks. This is my moment to say I want a divorce. And so I did when I walked back in the door.
Wow.
He hit the roof. I mean, he absolutely hit the roof and freaked out. It was a disaster. But that was the only way I knew how to do it. I'd been gone for 3 weeks. I felt so much peace with being gone. And I thought, it's now or never. It's now or never. This is ugly and messy, but this is the way we're doing it. So
I wish people understood the amount of bravery. I think it makes it even more sad, right? Because I wish people understood in the church how much bravery it takes for a woman to finally decide to leave and then get the guts to actually leave. It's such a brave decision. And then when she leaves, a lot of the time she is frowned upon and you copying even more abuse. But even just the point to get to a point where you're like, I'm ready to leave, and the courage to tell him that, it's just such a scary moment. And I wish people understood what it takes, like that the lead up to get to that point is such a long, hard, road, and it's such an internally conflicting period of time. I've not talked to one single woman who has been in this position who it's been a light issue for, and they've been flippant about it, which I think is so much of the projected viewpoint of women wanting divorce.
Yeah, it's as if it's taken lightly, and it's definitely was something I hadn't taken lightly. I had some people very, very sacrificially give me thousands of hours of time to process and talk to them on the phone and cry with them and go on holiday with them and take my kids to visit. And I mean, I was really, really blessed that I had some people that were very out of the box thinkers in their Christian faith. The moment I said I wanted a divorce, his parents were actually there. They had been there helping him with the children while I was gone for 3 weeks. And they went upstairs to their bedroom, instantly called other family members, and within 20 minutes, they had the top-rated divorce lawyer in the state we were in cured for him.
Wow.
I had not planned on a divorce lawyer or anything. That I had actually asked him just to move out of the house as the first step, and he wouldn't. But, you know, his family then the next day left and they never spoke to me again. And then my parents did not believe in what I was doing. God hates divorce. Yeah. And so they, even though they did not like my husband, they actually stood with him because that's what they principally felt was right. So I all of a sudden was very much standing alone and had no support at all in doing this. And so everyone's got a different story, but mine was, it was a disaster as far as family was concerned. I lost both sides of the family instantly. My parents barely spoke to me for years, and they would embrace my ex pretty regularly and support him. He created absolute havoc in our family. But again, the principal side of them that they couldn't allow their daughter to get divorced, they just stuck to their principles and felt like, even if it's hurting our daughter, this is not allowed in our family. They never asked me about the abuse. They didn't want to know. They weren't even open to that being an option to walk away. Morality in their mind was the only reason someone could walk away. And my dad, even then, feels like you should still try and work it out. My dad, he would say to me, just, you know, if you can just reconcile, just imagine the testimony you'll have. You can stand on stages and you and, you know, him and you will have such testimony to share. And I was like, wow, it's still all about the performance, you know, not what actually is happening here.
Again, it's such a traumatic situation in the first instance. Even what you were describing before, I've had that experience where I'm in the car with someone who is abusive and aggressive and is going off, and it is terrifying to be in that environment and doing everything you can to pacify them. So I wish people understood the level of trauma that's involved, and then to finally make the courageous decision, and then you're getting heaped on by church people.
I went to my pastor and I basically said, look, here's what's happening. And lovely guy, but he went to his bookshelf and pulled out Boundaries, the Boundaries book and Boundaries in Marriage, and kind of handed it to me and basically kind of said, figure it out. You know, you need to see if you can save this. And I went to him over and over for help, just wouldn't really stand on my side. The church was tough. Well, and I have to, you know, I had to actually have a hard moment with myself, because before I finally broke open that I was struggling, I think I was quite judgmental to people as well. I mean, I just had that, well, look, this is the way God works. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, like I think I was quite harsh on people, and I've had to have a moment of going, yeah, you were kind of a mean person as well. And you've got to look at yourself and realize everyone's walking a hard journey, and no one's taking this lightly.
Absolutely.
Especially, I think, mother with children. It's a really complex situation.
Yes. Yeah. And it's that religious spirit, if you want to call it that, like that religious spirit of, you know, we have to keep the facade almost. Like we have to be perfect. We have to be shown to be perfect. And if we're perfect, then that's how the world is saved and gets changed and everyone hears the gospel. And it's just, I don't even, I'm struggling for words today because I find it so mind blowing still, even after all these conversations around the same thing. But so during the time, I would love to know, how are you feeling about God through kind of the marriage and the divorce, or even before that? Like, what has your journey been with God through all of this?
I mean, I definitely was so hurt in the process, especially by my own father, which to this day is quite difficult. But I've always had the confidence that God loved me. And even in the years, you know, during the divorce, especially the early years when everything was so tragic, and like every other week I was losing my kids and I would just be completely lost by myself. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to follow the way things like I used to. And I kind of tested God in a bunch of different things. I felt so much grace and love. God was like, I get it, Tina. I get that you're trying to act out. I love you anyway. And there were moments that I could really feel God just right here, you know, with me. And so I've definitely been on a journey. I was never raised with what I would call the gospel of grace. I had that teaching always that was kind of like, you just do it. You just figure it out and you just move through the world. And I had to go, you know, I fell apart. My life fell apart. And in that moment that I hit rock bottom, guess who was there? Jesus was there for me. And we all have our own journey through that. But I have, still held on to my faith. Surprisingly, I've found it's sustained me. I actually don't know how I would have done this without a faith. I think I would have severely gone off the tracks and not had the inner strength to find my way through. I probably would have ended up as an alcoholic or in another terrible relationship or something without sticking to my faith. Not to say that it wasn't shaken terribly, it was, but I've made it through still loving God. It looks different than before, but that's important. That was good. That's how it should be. You know, it needed to look different. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's such a healthy shift to have those lenses taken off, like the religious lenses and the judgments and the perfectionism and all of that kind of thing. And it's really humbling. It's a horrible way to be humbled, I feel.
Yes.
but it is very humbling because you do come away and you do have a lot more compassion for people. You have a lot more insight and ability to see people and even see what's not seen or not normally seen on the surface. I know there are so many Bible verses that are always cited in divorce situations. What are your take on the top verses? Normally I've researched the passages and I haven't this time, but, you know, God hates divorce is one that comes up quite a lot. Like, what are your takes on some of those passages?
So I'm a pretty simple person. I really love the Gospels. I don't veer much from the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I do believe in the whole Bible, but I love the words of Jesus because I feel like he was so practical when he came. And the thing I love about Jesus the most was he was always upending the religious people that were trying to control things, right? And so one of my favorite passages, I've never heard anyone else talk like this, so I don't know if theologically this makes sense, but to me it makes sense. In Luke 14, Jesus was going to heal somebody and the religious leaders were very upset because it was going to be done on the Sabbath. And he says to them, even if a donkey fell into a ditch, you would go and help the donkey out of the ditch on the Sabbath because it's the right thing to do. And I compare that to a woman being in an abusive situation, right? You shouldn't get divorced. God hates divorce. It was kind of the equivalent of don't heal on the Sabbath, right? And yet there's moments where you break that law in order to do the right thing and to do the good thing. And if I'm the donkey, that's okay. I needed to be rescued out of that ditch and break out of that marriage. And that was the right thing to do. But for women that feel trapped, there's moments where, you know what, you've fallen into a ditch, you've fallen into a place that you can't control. It's you're helpless, you're lost, and you need somebody to free you from that ditch. And I needed to be freed from the ditch of an abusive marriage. And I'm so thankful again that I had some friends that were outside of the box thinkers that kind of gave me the permission to say, Tina, I'm going to give you the way out of here. And as I did that, I felt such freedom and grace. And, you know, one of the things for me, just to go back, one day I was again being physically abused. I was standing in the kitchen, and all four of my kids were sitting at the kitchen bar. And again, my husband started an argument about something, and he got so mad about something. He actually said, "Go to your room," as if I was one of the kids. And when I wouldn't go to my room, because I was like, I'm not a child, I'm standing here, we're going to try and, you know, I'd always be trying to just calmly walk through some of these situations. He grabbed me, threw me over his shoulder, walked me to the bedroom, threw me on the bed, and started hitting me and stuff. And as I was contemplating leaving, I got taken back, I'd say in the spirit, I don't know how else to say that, taken back to that moment. And it was like I was up in the corner of the room watching myself have that happen. And I could see my kids' faces. And yeah, it was like I was a spirit watching that whole thing play out. And I felt God say to me, you are an abuser too, if you don't stand up to this and protect your children and show them that this is not okay. And I realized I was teaching my daughters that men could abuse them, and teaching my sons that they could get away with this. And so that was also something that was very strong in me, that I knew I needed to break this curse that our family was under. When I got love bombed into the family, and again, I got brought into the family, it was about 6 months later that I found out that this was the 3 generations of abuse, that my mother-in-law was still getting abused by her husband. He would hit her regularly. And they then told me that the grandfather used to hit the grandmother all the time. So I'm like, okay, and now I've married the son, and the son is abusing me. So we've got 3 generations. Again, that moment when I got pulled up to the corner of the room, and like in the spirit, I could see myself. I thought, I'm going to be raising a 4th generation of sons that think they can abuse their wives. And I thought, no, it has to stop with me. It has to stop with me. And that was a huge motivation for me to kind of break that generational curse that I walked into blindly. I didn't really understand what that was at the time, but I knew that I needed to finish it and get out.
I love that so much, because all of the patterns are so generational, you know, the codependence and the abuse and all the things. You can see them continuously. And I think it is such a reason to even just turn and face small patterns. Even if people are watching or listening and they're like, okay, I've never been physically abused, or that's not seen in my family, but there are other things that will be in your family that you have the opportunity to turn and face those patterns. And it's so powerful. And it's like, if we face them, then we actually create freedom for the next generation. Like that is what's passed on generationally. That's the ripple effect. And that's so impactful. And it's like taking ownership of not the fact that you take ownership for someone else abusing you, but taking ownership for your bloodline and for your life and for your future is such a powerful place to get to. And yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah. So my kids needed better, and I needed better. And that was just where we ended up. It was a very important thing to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Love it. So how do you believe the church could better handle abuse and divorce situations? Like, because I feel like it's one thing that we can talk about, because I'm in no way anti-church. I think you've said you're in no way anti-church. So it's like, how do we feel like they could better handle divorce situations, especially within leadership and abuse as well? What changes do you think need to happen?
There's so many, it's a little overwhelming, you know. And again, there's some people that have wonderful pastors that take care of them. I found that to be more the exception than the norm. But there's always, women that will pop up on my Instagram and say, but I didn't have that experience. And I'm like, I'm so glad you didn't. Like, I don't want you to have my experience. It's just that most of us did have my experience, right? I think we've got to take the stigma off of leaving a marriage. That stigma, I always walked into church and felt like I had a scarlet A on my chest, and it just, man, was that heavy. People distanced themselves from me. People did not invite me over. I think a lot of people think, well, she's a free woman and she got divorced, she must be out after our husbands. She's gonna just seduce them right away from me, so we've got to keep her at arm's length. Like the stupidest stuff. And but it's there, it's real. Those feelings, I feel them. Pastors, again, we want to create the appearance of evil. Like, even that gets so weird. They won't talk to you or spend time with you, and it's just like, I'm not after you. I don't need you. I'm not interested. I'm not going to poach someone else's husband. All of the stigma just keeps on rolling. And so I think single women, even if you haven't come through a divorce, I think single women are treated very poorly at church, unless you serve. If you're serving, then you're in the right spot, right? Like, we can put you to work, and it's probably best that you are working. Where so many women need healing, they need to be loved, and actually, I need to be around healthy men and healthy marriages.
Yes.
Don't put me off to the side where I'm by myself. I'm by myself all the time. I need to be around healthy marriages. If a church could figure out a way to actually assign every divorced woman to a good, healthy marriage, like, how wonderful would that be?
Yes.
Because they need to understand my situation, and I certainly would love to understand theirs better.
Yes.
There's a million things we could do. I think we just need more fellowship. We need more compassion, more empathy.
I think more understanding too. It's like, while there is this separateness of the single people are over there, or the divorced people, divorced women, and then the marrieds over here, like, we have to keep them separate because, oh my gosh, she's going to steal the man. It's such bizarre thinking to me. Again, I don't know any woman that's like, oh my gosh, I'm divorced, I'm going to go and like eye up all the guys at church who are married. Like, but it's that integration and that understanding of both, because the perspective that divorced people, or divorced women in particular, have is a beautiful thing to have as a married couple, to understand that perspective, because it would make a marriage stronger when they understand what other marriages are like and what God's intention for marriage is and God's design. I think there's so much benefit from really gleaning and understanding each other's journeys. So I want to kind of flip the conversation and go to, what does your life look like now? You said the word freedom before. I just felt so free. And I'm sure a lot of women can relate to that. When I left, I had a lot of people saying, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's the happiest I've been for ages. So I think people didn't really understand that. But it's that sense of freedom. How do you experience that moving forward in your life? What does life look like for you now?
It's a great question. I've had some years that are better than others. I'm not going to lie. It's been a roller coaster. I have only in the last 2 or 3 years really started opening up about my situation. And that was because my youngest finally finished high school, and I no longer had a shared parenting agreement with my ex. And so I did not speak up like this when my kids were still shared custody. Everyone's got their own journey to walk, but I felt like I needed to be kind of quiet. But I've been doing sales. I've continued in my sales jobs, and I've had to work. I still work. Even though I coach people and counsel people, I still have a job. But I have found my own way. I found my own joy in my house. I, over time, slowly replaced every stick of furniture and everything I had from when I was married, and have now got my own stuff. Created my own traditions with my kids. I have really strong relationship with my kids. I spent probably most of my money and most of my time in the last 12 years putting my kids first. That was a decision I made. I have 4 children. And again, to be honest, my oldest child does not speak to me. He got totally love bombed and taken away by his dad. And there's a lot of, that's another whole story. And that's really, really sad. It breaks my heart. But my 3 other kids that stuck around with me, we are incredibly close. And now my oldest daughter is married, so now I have a wonderful son-in-law, and my son just got engaged, and so I'm going to have another daughter-in-law in the next 6 months or so. Beautiful. So God's adding to my family, and I'm so grateful for that, because it's just a joy. I spend a lot of time doing affirmations and training my mind to not be an abused mindset, and training my mind to believe for good things. My life isn't here perfect roses and happy things every moment, but what I do is I know that life is better than it was. Life continues to hold many, many opportunities, and I'm here making choices to move on and to get healed and to be as healthy as I know how to be, so my children know what that looks like, and we continue to roll on with the family blessing after breaking those generational curses. I kind of feel like I'm rebuilding the walls of a city, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's going to happen, and it is good. So yeah,
that's really beautiful. I don't know if you find the same thing, but like to be look back and be like, oh, for me, my divorce anniversary is just early next year, so it's in the calendar, I'm going to celebrate it. And it's being able to look back, and it's like the hardest decade that you've ever lived through ever, but it's just so exciting to be able to see the progress, see the change, celebrate the change, and to be on that journey of evolution and becoming more and more of yourself and exploring more. And it's just, it's very exciting.
It is. I randomly put a reel together on Instagram with some fun family photos that a friend of mine had taken, and, put it with a trending song, and just shared about my divorce. I literally think I spent less than 5 minutes putting that reel together.
Yeah.
And it got 4 million views.
Holy Moses.
And all of a sudden I went from, I think I had like 700 friends, maybe not even 700 friends on Instagram at the time. And all of a sudden within like a month, I got 12,000 people starting to follow me.
Wow.
And I then started getting so many DMs from people asking for help. And it kind of freaked me out. I'm not going to lie. I shut down. I was like, I don't want this job. I mean, like, I just randomly put something together. Like, I was not thinking I was going to reach 4 million.
That's crazy.
People.
Yeah.
And so I kind of didn't do much of anything with my Instagram. I was continuing to get DMs from people all over the world. And so I just started making a point of going, you know what, I'm going to speak regularly about this. I'm going to speak up. And that's when things started picking back up. And I started being more intentional about sharing my story, and not being so scared about opening my mouth and using my voice. Yeah. Everyone's at different stages. Not everyone needs to consume my stuff for forever and ever. But typically you can kind of jump in and out of whatever I'm saying, because I'm on a journey too. I'm hoping I'm taking everyone with me, right? I'm wanting people to not live in the dysfunction, because it's easy to live in the dysfunction. We could talk about narcissism and abuse. You and I could sit on here for 24 hours straight and probably still not run out of stories to share.
Yeah.
But we can't stay there. We can't stay in the mud. The donkey isn't supposed to stay in the ditch, right? We're supposed to get out of the ditch and move on. And that's my hope.
It's so powerful. It's really needed. It's really needed. Like voices like yours. We're in that world. We've consumed so many other people's voices. Sometimes we can think it's like there's no space for ours, but like your journey, I know people that your journey is such a really powerful testimony for bravery and for moving forward and to making choices. And I want to thank you. Thank you for making that decision to leave, because that has had, I know what the impact it will have had on your children for you to be able to do that, because you have drawn the line in the sand and said, this is not normal, this is not okay. And that alone is so powerful. But then you also have moved to a place where you are bravely stepping out and sharing your story. And it's just very needed. I would love to hear just some tips that you have for firstly the woman considering divorce, then the woman who is kind of going through it, coming out the other side, and then the woman who maybe holds some guilt and shame. So firstly, the woman considering divorce, what would you say to her?
Don't rush into it. I thought about it for a long time, and not everyone has to think about it as long as I did. But I think, again, family is precious. When you join two people together, even if you don't have children, when you integrate your life with somebody, it's not easy to break that up. And so take it seriously. But then in taking it seriously, plan. You've got to get out with a plan. And then make sure you've got 2 or 3 people that you can really rely on, that they know your situation intimately, that they are on your side. I couldn't have done it without just a couple of strong people. I would have loved more people helping me, but that just wasn't the case. I had about 2 people that really wanted to help me out, and they did. Consider it carefully, really plan, and then execute with vision of not staying stuck, that your life can get better, and know where you're heading. I very much knew where I was heading, what my goals were. Because I had children, I was motivated on their behalf to make their lives better. I had seen them suffering for years as well. And so, yeah, there was many times I wanted to give up, believe me. And I had to go, you know what, if I don't stick around and keep going, my kids have nobody, so yeah, every life is valuable. Everyone is worthy of a good life. And so if you're thinking about escaping from an abusive marriage, you're worthy of a good life, and you're worthy of safety. And I think that's my most important thing is don't belittle yourself. Don't believe the narcissist lies about you. You are worthy of good things happening to you in peace. The reason I finally made that decision after 3 years and pulled the trigger when I did was because I had a couple come and stay with us, and they had their camper parked out in our driveway for like a week, and they were kind of in and out and hanging out with us. And I was sitting out with her having a glass of wine one evening in their camper, and she looked at me and she said, "Tina, there's something terribly wrong when you're home." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And she looked at me dead on and said, "What are you going to do about it?"
Wow.
And I kind of was shaken. It was like she poured power into me that I didn't know I had. Because yes, I had been thinking about leaving, but I just wasn't pulling the trigger. And that was like my freedom moment to go, you have the power to pull the trigger. What are you going to do about it? And I couldn't even verbalize that I was being physically abused. But I said to her, if I stand up to him, then, I kind of made the motion like I was going to get slapped. And she went, yeah. So what are you going to do? And like, I just loved the brashness of it. She had no sympathy for me in that moment. And I didn't need it in that moment. She was shaking me and going, get your power on, girl. Like, figure this out. You've got the power to make a change.
Yeah.
And boy, was that exactly what I needed in that moment. And,
what a legend.
And what helped me get out.
She sounds so awesome.
Oh, she is awesome. Yeah.
I love that. So the woman who's going through divorce, coming out the side, personally, I know some women that are dealing with like lawyers and kids and all the things, and it's just like can't find their feet kind of feeling. So the woman that's really in the trenches on the way out.
Man, I feel for you. I probably have the most compassion for women right here and going through it, because you've made that first step to get out. And hopefully you're not going to go back, but you're not through it yet, right? And you are a really tough place. And so honestly, there's nothing you can do but keep moving forward. It's like you're on a swinging rope bridge and you're halfway through. And it's like there's that crashing water underneath, and it's a raging river underneath. And you know what? You've got to just keep getting through to the other side. And it's unpleasant. That bridge is swinging hard, and it is uncomfortable, and there's no place to rest on that bridge, and you just have to keep moving forward. And man, it's a hard place to be. So My advice for those women is to find as much time as you can to just love yourself, remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing, and know this too shall pass. And not for none of us, it happens in the timing we want. Leaving a narcissist, especially, is just the worst. I mean, they will do so many crazy tactics to hurt you on the way out, and they'll especially use children to get back at you. The narcissists don't have a lot of, empathy for kids at all. They're really a tool to hurt the mother. And so that makes it even more hard. And if you don't have kids and you're leaving a narcissist, it's still hard. They'll use friends against you. They'll use your job against you. They'll use whatever they need to against you to make life difficult. So yeah, just hang on to Jesus. I mean, those were my moments that I really, really have told a lot of people this. I would lay in bed and just put my arms out like this. Put my arms out like this. And I would just say, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. It was the simplest prayer for me, because my parents had rejected me and my in-laws had rejected me. I would say to him, I'm your problem. Jesus, help me. I'm your problem. I'm your daughter. And I've got no one else. I've got no one else. You are my plan A. There's no plan B. You're my plan A.
I think there's a verse in Psalms. I'll have to find it and put it in the bottom of this podcast episode. But there's a verse that says, though my father and mother will reject me, the Lord will receive me. And it's the most beautiful verse, because it is. It's just, you will be received. Even if you've got, for so many listening to this, they've got complex and challenging relationships with God. For me, once I worked through kind of the lack of safety and the frustrations and anger towards God, it is just this feeling like, I know he'll receive me. Like, I know that at the end of the day, he's the one that's got my back. No matter what, no matter the storm, no matter the bridge, the swaying,
absolutely. It was kind of a challenge to God as well. Like, I didn't often say it in the nicest way. I was saying it actually in a very angry way, like, I'm your problem. Like, I need you to figure this out. And the cool thing about God is he's not precious in that sense. He's not getting his feelings hurt by me being angry. There was a lot of things that I worked out through my divorce about my relationship with God that way, is that I can be honest, I can be truthful, I can tell him the ugly, and I don't need to hide that anymore. I don't need to be perfect. Like growing up, hiding my mother's mental illness. Don't need to do that anymore. Don't need to try and be something I'm not. Yeah. Within reason, I share the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's just reality of life.
I love your metaphor of the bridge, because it's very accurate, and the swinging and the all the things. But I love the metaphor because it's a progression, right? So you're still making progress. You're still going to come out the other side eventually. You just have to keep moving. And it's having that, I always had that vision of like, like, I just have to get through this. So for me, it was like a financial battle for 2 years over like property settlement. It extended the maximum, like to the week, the maximum that he could have dragged it out, it was dragged out. And so it was like, just eyes on the prize, just keep moving. It's like, at some point it will finish. It won't go on forever. Absolutely. That was just my mentality through, like, just get through. And so what about the women who have been through divorce, perhaps holding on some guilt and shame around it, especially with that kind of religious conditioning that God hates divorce people are wrong. They might have been shamed from religious people in churches and family members who are religious. So what's your advice for that woman?
I think the first thing you'd need to do is grieve. I think we don't allow enough for grief. Just like when someone dies, I think as a society in the Western world, we're not very good with grief. But a marriage died, something that you had so much faith and hope and trust in has gone awry. And I think you really need to give yourself time to grieve what you lost, all the expectations you had, and the life that you wanted to live is not what the life you're going to live at that moment. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is really take stock of where you're at. What is it that you're enjoying about life? What is it that you're not enjoying about life? And really, really don't allow life to just kind of push you along kind of randomly. I think you really have to take stock of what's happening. And then the third thing is find vision for where you want to be. You are going to have to carve out a life, the life that you want. How do you want to show up in the world and present yourself and live for the rest of this time? And I spent a lot of time going, okay, I don't know if I'm getting remarried. I'm yet to be remarried 12 years later. So who am I? Who do I want to be? Can I be content with myself? If it's just me for the rest of my days, then I want to be someone that I enjoy being with when I'm by myself. And so I spent quite a bit of time, alone figuring that out and getting to know myself and my what's actually in there. Because I kind of lived in a coma. That's another part of my story is I kind of went comatose in my marriage. When things were so rough, I disassociated, right? And so coming out the other side, even a rough divorce and then being a single parent for so long, I have to figure out, what are my hobbies? What are things I enjoy doing? How do I want to dress now? How do I want my home to look like? What are the things that Tina does on her own that she enjoys and wants to be that person for the rest of my life? I think women need to really find a vision for themselves for moving forward, because it is a lonely place. And I know people that have gotten remarried and they're okay, happy, but they're not 100% thrilled either. And maybe they jumped too soon, or they didn't do enough of the inner work that they needed to make that marriage work. There's wonderful stories of people who have gotten remarried and had a wonderful life. And like I say on my Instagram all the time, when someone says that to me, I'm like, I love a redemption story. I love that. And I want that for me too. But it hasn't happened yet. And I'm just out here chilling. So what do I want to do with my life, and how do I want to enjoy it, and how do I want to live it? So there's a lot of assessment that needs to happen, I think, once you're through it.
I love it's such a coach answer, because it's such a strategic approach, which I love. I love it because you've clearly walked people through this part of the journey before, but it's like having a strategic approach to your life and what it is that you want. And for some women, it is for the first time asking themselves what they want, especially like yourself, after like kiddies have flown the nest. It's like, who am I now? What do I do with my life? What's my purpose? And I just think it's so exciting to be able to sit down and have that strategic approach to it and go, you know what, I do have power here. Again, that's what I love about your work too. It's like, it's from a really empowered place. It's like, what I want now. And that really comes across through your Instagram as well, through like the freedom that you have and the life that you get to enjoy, that you are carving out for yourself. And it's God-given power to be able, God goes, here you go, here's your beautiful life. Like go and make something amazing out of it. He's not controlling and like looking down and being like, you have to do this and you have to do that. And I think that's one of the most exciting things. So that being said, I would love to know about what's next for you, given your strategic approach to things. What does the next 5-10 years look like? What is the vision that you have?
My vision statement for the work that I do on social media or whatever is to be the person I wish I had had when I was going through my situation, right? 12 years ago, social media we had Facebook, but Instagram is so much different now. And we have other great social media places we can meet. And so, I just want to put out there the resources that I wish I had had when I was needing them. And so I want to do more of that. I want to do more women's retreats. I think there's something so powerful about sharing your story, meeting other women. Like, it's just so wonderful chatting with you. Like, when we can share, when we can laugh together, grieve together, encourage each other, I think there's just such power. So I am hoping to do more women's retreats and get women together to empower them in their journey. No matter where you are, like you asked 3 really great segments, and those are the 3 segments of people I deal with, right? People that are just starting to think about the possibility of escaping, the people that are in the middle of it, and now the people that are on the other side. And gosh, there's so many different dynamics happening with all of that. But more information, more love, more encouragement. I would love to just do this for the rest of my life, honestly.
I love that.
It's just developing a side of me that I guess kind of feel like, wow, if I can turn my mess into a message, then and I know that's very trite and people have used that a lot. that's just really where it's at, right? My place was a mess. I was a hot mess. And I'm really glad that I can now speak freely and have the support of my family. And I don't show my family as much. They want their privacy. They still support me and have learned a lot through a lot of stuff I'm sharing about too. So,
yeah, absolutely. So if anyone wants to find you or work with you or follow you, where do people best find you?
Mainly on Instagram, I am at k.ravenhill. And you can find me there. And then there's a link in my bio that you can schedule a session with me right there. I'm happy to chat. Some people just want to have a one-off conversation, and I'm here for it. And I want to support you. Other people, continuously connect with me through private messages and conversations. You can find me there. And eventually a book will be coming. I'm slowly working on that.
I love it.
And probably more YouTube this in 2024. I'll be doing a lot of YouTube stuff. So yeah, getting more regular out there with more topics and things I want to discuss in more depth than what I can share on Instagram.
Beautiful. I love the retreats as well. I think that's such a fantastic way to bring women together. And I was, even while you were talking about the 3 different groups, I could just see like the dynamics in the group. I was thinking about Leah 10 years ago, if she had something like that, where there were women ahead of her in the journey that could encourage her and give her tips and be like, oh, it's going to be crap for a while, but after that, it's going to be good. So you just having that and like had that community, I think is just such a beautiful just extension of your work, the online work, to be able to go offline like that. Very exciting. I love that idea. And the book, I'm super excited for the book.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story, sharing so vulnerably. I related to so much of it, and I know my audience will as well, in many different aspects. And I think it's such a beautiful journey that you've shared also with God, and the ups and downs, because it's just an authentic, very real and raw, relatable account, because it hasn't all been roses and sunshine and having that time where you need to wrestle. I just want to really thank you and honor you, and thank you for making the decisions you've made and being brave and just sharing that light and that message to the women that are following you now.
Well, thank you, Leah. I appreciate being on here and looking forward to connecting with you more.
Thanks for joining this expansive session. Subscribe or follow so you don't miss a show. And to help us share this message further, take a quick second to leave the Spiritually Unboxed podcast a rating and review. In iTunes, just click the reviews tab, and in Spotify, go to the main podcast page and tap the 3 horizontal lines under the podcast cover image. Now go out into the world and be the incredible masterpiece that you are. I'll see you in the next episode.